On the morning of August 27, 2025, the United States was shaken by a devastating act of violence at Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A 23-year-old man named Robin Westman entered the school grounds carrying legally purchased firearms and opened fire, leaving 2 children dead and at least 17 others injured before turning the weapon on himself. The victims included not only students but also elderly parishioners who were present on the campus, reflecting the indiscriminate nature of the attack. Federal authorities, including the FBI, quickly announced that the shooting would be investigated as an act of domestic terrorism and a potential hate crime, given that the institution targeted was a Catholic school. The tragic events have ignited national debates about gun violence, religious intolerance, and the challenges of preventing radicalized acts of domestic violence in communities across the country. According to eyewitnesses and preliminary police reports, the attacker arrived at the school campus in the late morning, when classes and parish activities were already underway. Armed with multiple weapons, he began shooting in and around the school premises. The swift response of law enforcement, including the Minneapolis Police Department and federal agents, prevented even greater casualties, but the damage was nonetheless catastrophic. 2 children, one 8 years old and the other 10, were killed in the assault. Among the wounded were a number of children, as well as older members of the Catholic parish community who had been visiting the school facilities. The attacker ended his life at the scene before police could apprehend him, leaving investigators scrambling for answers as to his motive and state of mind. The FBI's decision to categorize the incident as a potential act of domestic terrorism and a hate-motivated crime highlights the gravity of the shooting. Domestic terrorism in U.S. law refers to violent criminal acts committed within the country with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population or to influence government policy through intimidation. In this case, investigators are exploring whether the Catholic identity of the school was a deliberate factor in the selection of the target. This consideration is critical given the rising concerns in recent years about targeted violence against religious communities, including churches, synagogues, and mosques. The Bureau is now analyzing Westman's digital footprint, social media activity, and possible affiliations with extremist groups to determine if his actions were ideologically driven. In the aftermath of the shooting, national leaders across the political spectrum responded with public statements. President Donald Trump issued remarks condemning the violence and ordered flags to be flown at half-mast across the country until August 31st to honor the victims. Former President Barack Obama also spoke out, expressing solidarity with the affected families and emphasizing the urgent need to address the epidemic of gun violence that continues to claim lives in schools, places of worship, and public spaces. Other politicians and community leaders echoed these sentiments, some focusing on the need for stricter gun laws, while others highlighted the importance of combating extremism and hate-based ideologies. The bipartisan outpouring of grief and condemnation reflects the seriousness with which the nation views the tragedy. For the local Minneapolis community, the impact has been particularly devastating. Annunciation Catholic School is not only an educational institution, but also a hub of faith and community life for families in the region. Vigils were quickly organized, with hundreds gathering in prayer and solidarity outside the school and nearby churches. Clergy members called for unity and resilience in the face of hatred, reminding parishioners that their faith community has survived adversity before and will endure again. Local residents, many of whom knew the victims or their families personally, have begun raising funds and offering assistance to those affected by the violence. Counselors and trauma specialists have been dispatched to support children, parents, and staff coping with the psychological aftermath. The tragedy also raises once again the contentious debate over America's gun laws. Reports confirm that Westman had acquired his weapons legally, despite his young age and apparent lack of a stable support system. Critics argue that this underscores the inadequacy of current background checks and restrictions, as individuals with violent intentions continue to gain access to deadly firearms. Gun rights advocates, on the other hand, caution against immediate political responses, suggesting that the focus should remain on the motives of the perpetrator and on broader societal issues rather than solely on firearm access. The tension between these two perspectives has long defined the national discourse on gun violence, and this latest tragedy will likely intensify calls for legislative reform. Beyond the political debate, security analysts are also examining the broader implications of the incident for domestic terrorism trends in the United States. In recent years, federal agencies have documented a rise in attacks linked to domestic extremists, some motivated by racial, religious, or ideological hatred. Schools and houses of worship have been identified as vulnerable, soft targets, where large gatherings and limited security create opportunities for maximum impact. The Minneapolis attack adds to a troubling list of such incidents and raises urgent questions about what preventive measures might help protect these community spaces. Proposals range from increasing security presence at schools and religious institutions to strengthening early warning systems that can identify radicalized individuals before they act. The grief of the families directly affected by the shooting remains the most harrowing aspect of the tragedy. Parents of the slain children have spoken through representatives, expressing devastation at the loss of young lives full of promise. The families of the injured are enduring long hours in hospitals, hoping for recovery while also grappling with the trauma of having experienced such violence in a place meant to be safe. Community volunteers have organized meal trains, donation drives, and vigils to offer tangible and emotional support, demonstrating once again the resilience that often follows in the wake of tragedy. Still, the sense of loss is profound and will not easily heal. One particularly troubling element of the investigation is the possibility that the attack was motivated by anti-Catholic sentiment. While Catholics represent one of the largest religious groups in the United States, anti-Catholic prejudice has deep historical roots and occasionally manifests in acts of hostility. If evidence confirms that Westman deliberately targeted the school because of its Catholic identity, the incident would mark one of the most significant acts of religiously motivated domestic terrorism in recent years. Such a finding could influence not only the criminal investigation, but also national policies aimed at protecting religious institutions and prosecuting hate crimes more aggressively. The coming weeks will likely reveal more details about Westman's background, his planning, and his motivations. Authorities are reviewing his online activity and speaking with acquaintances to piece together a portrait of his life and mindset. Early indications suggest that he was socially isolated and may have harbored grievances, though whether these grievances rose to the level of ideological extremism remains to be seen. The FBI's classification of the attack as possible domestic terrorism means the full resources of the federal government will be deployed to uncover every detail, from how the weapons were purchased to whether others encouraged or supported the act. As the nation mourns, the Minneapolis school shooting is already being seen as a defining moment in the continuing struggle to address gun violence and domestic terrorism. It has rekindled painful memories of past tragedies from Columbine to Sandy Hook to Uvalde, each of which sparked similar debates and calls for action. Whether this latest atrocity will lead to meaningful policy changes or fade into the long list of unresolved national wounds remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that the lives lost cannot be replaced, and the community of Minneapolis will carry the scars of this day for years to come. In the end, the shooting at Annunciation Catholic School is more than just another tragic headline. It is a stark reminder of the vulnerability of America's most cherished institutions, its schools, its houses of worship, and its communities. It calls into question the effectiveness of current systems for preventing violence and challenges the nation to confront not only its relationship with guns, but also the deeper currents of hatred and extremism that can drive individuals to commit atrocities. For the grieving families, the investigation and the political debates provide little immediate comfort. Their world has been irrevocably changed. Yet in the vigils, the prayers, and the solidarity shown across the nation, there lies a measure of hope that such suffering will not be in vain, and that lessons drawn from this tragedy might one day prevent another community from enduring the same pain.